This took place at my 14th birthday sleepover about 10 years ago, and I still can't forget it. The garage my parents had on our land was partly fixed up by them. There were walls and a bathroom, but there was still an open garage door that could be rolled up. It was also important to note that there were no shades on the windows. We often hang out with friends in the garage because my folks let us. The closest neighbor was almost 2 miles away, so our land wasn't completely alone. On our street, there were never any problems because doors didn't need to be locked. Mom and Dad finally let my friends and I have the party in the garage on my birthday. Even though my mom wasn't sure, my dad agreed because it was my birthday. We were told to go to bed and turn off the lights by 11 p.m. before we could sleep in the garage after a day full of sugar and fun. I had to make sure that the garage door was locked from the inside too. We turned off the lights at 11 p.m., but instead of going to sleep, we chose to play hide and seek in the dark, which is a standard way for teens to have fun. My best friend was it in the third round, and I was hiding behind a cabinet near the roller door. When the first person was caught, everyone laughed. But then I heard laughter from behind me. Since I was against the wall and door, I thought at first it was just an echo. No one could have been behind me. As soon as the second person was caught, I heard the laughing again, but this time it was closer. I was scared as hell, but I didn't want to mess up the game, so I quietly moved to a different place by a window. The moon was bright enough to make shadows even though it was dark outside. I could clearly see shadows in the garage, which was completely dark, from where I was standing. As I hid, I saw a shadow go by the window and then stop. I stopped moving because I thought it might be my dad or older brother checking on us. My best friend walked right up to me and laughed. I quickly told her to be quiet and said, "My dad is outside. Go back to sleep." When we grabbed the other girls, they all went back to their sleeping bags because they thought we were going to get in trouble. The shadow was still there when I turned over in my sleeping bag to face the window. My heart beat fast. The shadow moved away, and then we heard the garage door being scratched. The other girls saw it too, and we all began to quietly freak out. We crowded together, hoping that it was all in our heads. Then there was a knock on the door, and then people laughed. We were scared, but we didn't scream. My mom gave me a phone for my birthday, but it was still in the house with the other gifts, so we couldn't call them. We yelled at whoever it was to leave because we were scared. This made them laugh and bang on the windows even more. The shadow got longer. Someone grown up, or a big kid must have done it. We threw a mattress against the window to stop it, but the person tapped and laughed at another window instead. We rushed into the bathroom, but I was able to see through the open door. Someone was trying to open the garage door by shaking it. Last but not least, I screamed as loud as I could. The shaking stopped right away. We looked around and saw the house lights come on. Then my dad ran over to us. It was the same time that a car sped off down the road. Before my dad opened the garage door and saw 5 crying girls inside, we didn't get a good look at it. He brought us all back to the house where my mom made us feel better. Each of us slept on their king-size bed in their room that night. After that, sleepovers could only happen at home. I couldn't sleep in that garage again for 2 years. I'm a woman in my early 20s, and thinking about what happened to me still makes me nervous. While my parents were out of town, I had to stay with them to take care of our 3 little dogs. Usually, I stay with my boyfriend. Also, my next-door grandmother, who works as a truck driver, was out of town, so I was by myself. It felt strange. I let the dogs run around in the garden around 7 p.m. All of a sudden, they began barking very loudly at the dark alley near the back gate. I got up to see if anyone was there, but I didn't see anyone. I felt uneasy, though. I locked the door and told the dogs to come back inside. That night, my brother got back from a trip with his girlfriend late, so I could go back to my own place. I got comfortable and started to enjoy the peace and quiet by watching scary videos. Around 11 p.m., my sister came over to say she was going to spend the night with her boyfriend, leaving me alone once more. I woke up to a strange noise in my room around 12:55 a.m. A dark person stood to my left when I looked over there. I first thought it was my sister using her phone light, so I asked, "What are you doing?" The figure turned and ran as soon as I spoke. That's when I saw it wasn't my sister, but a grown man. I jumped out of bed and ran down the stairs after him because I was scared. I saw him sneak out of the back gate, which was the same gate where the dogs had been barking earlier. I was scared when I called the cops. After that, I went to my mom's house to tell my brother what had happened. We had to wait for the cops while he went outside with a bat. The cops searched the whole house when they got there but didn't find anything missing. We found out later that the man got in through a window downstairs that I forgot to lock. I felt cold and wondered what he really wanted since he hadn't stolen anything. I'm scared to think about what could have happened that night if I hadn't woken up. I'm a woman in my early 20s, and this creepy event still makes me feel bad. When my parents were out of town, I had to stay with them to take care of our 3 little dogs. Usually, I stay with my boyfriend. It felt weird not having anyone else around, but I was fine with being alone. My grandma and I share a 2-story house nearby. She was also out of town, leaving me all by myself. I let the dogs run around in the garden around 7 p.m. They started barking all of a sudden in the dark side hallway, close to a gate that led to an alley. I checked out what they were barking at but didn't find anyone. I locked the door and called the dogs back inside because I felt uncomfortable. In the evening, my brother came home from his trip with his girlfriend, which let me go back to my place. I sat down to watch scary movies in the dark once I got there. Someone else in my family came by around 11 p.m. to say they were going to their boyfriend's house, leaving me alone again. I woke up to a noise in my room around 12:55 a.m. When I turned to my left, I saw a person standing by the door. I first thought it was my sister using her phone light, so I asked, "What are you doing?" The person turned around and ran down the stairs as soon as I spoke. It scared me when I realized it wasn't my sister, but a man. A big man was running down the stairs in my house. Even though I knew it wasn't safe, I jumped up to follow him. He ran out of the back gate that went to the same alley that the dogs had been barking at earlier. I ran downstairs and caught a glimpse of him. I told my brother right away and called the cops. He then went outside with a bat in case the man came back. When the cops arrived, they searched the house but didn't find anything missing. He got in through a window downstairs that I had forgotten to lock, which we found out. It's impossible for me to believe that he wasn't there to rob us. Since he didn't take anything, I'm scared to think about what he might have been up to if I hadn't woken up. I had a small group of close friends when I was in 6th grade. There were 4 of us, and we were all girls. We stayed at each other's houses for sleepovers all the time. We all lived close to each other. The house that was the farthest away was only 10 minutes away. We slept over at my friend Caitlin's house one time. One of her cousins was visiting, and while the girl cousin was nice, the boy cousin made me feel bad. Caitlin's brother was about the same age as us, and was a junior in high school. We loved hearing Caitlin's older sisters talk about her high school friends' bad habits. The boy, Caitlin's cousin, was weird. He had dirty, stringy hair, and his smile looked like he was thinking about something else while he smiled. Later that night, Caitlin told us that she had only recently met her cousins after a long time of not seeing them. The girl cousin was nice to her, but the boy cousin was weird. Whenever he got there, he tried to hang out with her instead of her brother. He would talk to her and look through her toys and books in her room. He also touched her face and hair in a strange way. He would stare at her coldly, and then force that creepy smile back on her when she flinched or pulled away. We both thought it was strange, but we moved on to other things. Before bed, we watched a movie and took turns going to the bathroom down the hall. My friend Lucia told me she was done when she got back, and I was glad. I was ready to brush my teeth and go to bed. As I walked down the hall and opened the bathroom door while my mind was elsewhere, I saw Caitlin's cousin sitting on the closed toilet in the dark. I quickly said sorry, shut the door, and began to leave, but I felt uncomfortable. He opened the door, gave me a creepy smile, and said I could leave before I could. I really didn't want to brush my teeth, but I didn't want to make a fuss, so I slowly went into the bathroom. He shocked me by following me and telling me, "I'll walk you back to your room." He grabbed my hand before I could answer. I thought I was going to pass out because his hand was so hot and sweaty. He finally let go when we got to Caitlin's room. He said goodbye and went to the guest room. My friends saw that I was upset when I got back to the room. They got it from me, and Caitlin said she'd tell her mom in the morning. It wasn't over, though. For some reason, we couldn't lock the doors during sleepovers, which was normal. Caitlin woke me up in the middle of the night. She was scared and told us in a whisper that her cousin had already opened the door twice to look at us while we slept. We chose to act like we were asleep so that he would leave us alone. We heard the door creak open again soon after, though. There was a shape in the doorway and he just stood there and looked at us. We were afraid to move. After a quiet, unsettling laugh, he mumbled something we couldn't understand and then shut the door again. We squished together because we couldn't sleep. My mom picked me up early the next morning and I was glad that Caitlin's cousin was still asleep. After the fact, Caitlin told me that she had told her mom, who was very worried. Caitlin's cousins never came over again after that, and before I stayed with them, my mom always made sure they didn't have any other guests. I live in a small town in the country with about 10 to 15 houses. It only takes 5 minutes to get to the highway, and it only takes 10 minutes to get to the next town. A park is just across the street and a 10-minute walk from my house. My partner and I chose to go for a walk on the first day of Christmas to burn off some of the holiday food. It was around 5 o'clock. It was already dark, so I brought my camera and a bright LED lamp. We planned to take a dirt path through the woods after going down a small country road that led to the forest. As we walked, I saw something that the flashlight could shine on. A car parked next to the path, partly hidden by the trees. It was strange because cars aren't supposed to be on that road. We shined a light inside and saw that it was empty. The windows were frosty, which meant that it had been there for a while. I asked my partner to shine the flashlight on an interesting tree so I could take a shot of it. My partner suddenly said, "There's someone standing." I looked up and saw a man standing behind us, just out of reach of the flashlight. He just stared at us without saying anything. I told him I was just taking pictures of the tree to stay calm. He kept looking and didn't say anything. We quickly left by following the path to the next town after I asked him if he needed a flashlight. He replied quietly, "No." When I got to a well-lit area, I turned around and saw the car come out of the woods and then turn around to go back in. He parked his car again and turned off the lights. We chose a longer way to get home instead of the walk. The battery in our flashlight was almost dead, and my phone was almost dead, so I couldn't call the cops right away. When I got home, I called them to tell them what happened and gave them as much information as I could remember. I wish I had remembered his whole license plate number, but I'm glad I wasn't by myself. We were being watched the whole time, and I don't want to think about what might have happened if I were by myself. It took place with my friend Sam a few days ago. We love being outside, and our friends just showed us a beautiful place in Wisconsin's Grant Park. We had been there a few times together and loved the views of Lake Michigan. There are bridges, paths, and roads that run through this big park. Sam and I are both about 5 feet 2 inches or 5 feet 3 inches, which makes us short. It can feel risky to go somewhere by yourself. It was almost dark the first time we went by ourselves. The pictures were for a board role-playing game we were making called Hunter the Darkness. A man got out of his car and yelled, "Hey, Scott," as we walked across a bridge at us, but we didn't answer. Not long after that, the same car came back from the other way. This time, the driver called out to us. The car drove off as we walked faster. The car showed up again, coming toward us just as we got to the end of the bridge from the first way. We hid in the woods and up the hill for 15 minutes until we felt safe enough to go. After that, you might think we wouldn't go to the park again, but after leaving and getting warm with hot chocolate, we laughed it off and thought we were going too far. We went back a few times with our male friends, but nothing happened each time, so Sam and I chose to go back by ourselves to get more pictures. This time, as soon as we got back on that bridge, a guy yelled at us from a car. We quickly hid in the woods because we didn't want to wait. We chose to avoid the photo spot and instead go down to the pier for some sunset pictures. The road to the pier curves around to lead to a parking lot. From there, you can cross a bridge to get to a close neighborhood with a tennis court. We saw the same car go around and come back as we got closer to the parking lot. When we rolled down all the windows, we saw that there were 5 guys and a girl inside. "We've been waiting for you," yelled one. "And come on, don't be shy," said the other. "All we want to do is have fun." We were wearing winter coats and hats, so it wasn't like it was hard to spot us. They didn't bother us, so we kept walking until we heard, "We're coming back for you." Sam and I ran toward the bridge, and we eventually made a quick turn between some houses in the neighborhood. Finally, we got back to our car and hid there, scared and out of breath. We ran through the preserve and across roads. After that, we never went back to the park by ourselves again. When we went to see our friends, they insisted on coming with us. These events took place during my 14th birthday party 10 years ago, and I still can't forget them. On our property, my parents had a garage that they had partly fixed up. The garage door rolled up and wasn't fully sealed, and there were no curtains on the windows. The walls were insulated and there was a bathroom. In the end, this element will be very important. My brother could hang out with his friends in the garage most of the time, but I couldn't have people stay the night there. However, it was my birthday and I begged my dad to let me. We finally set up in the garage after a day of eating too much sugar and making my parents crazy. We were told to go to bed and turn off the lights by 11 p.m. For the night, we watched movies, played games, and ate more candy. I made sure to lock the garage door roller from the inside. We turned off the lights at 11 p.m. and tried to sleep, but instead we played hide and seek in the dark. My best friend was it in the 3rd round, and I was hiding behind a cabinet next to the roller door. When the first person was caught, everyone laughed. But then I heard someone else laughing behind me. The sound was faint and seemed to be coming from outside. Since I was pressed up against the door, I didn't see anyone behind me. I thought it might have been an echo or one of my friends hiding nearby. I heard the laughing again, this time louder right outside the door after the second person was caught. I was really scared, but I didn't want to mess up the game. I moved quietly to a new spot and turned to face one of the windows. The moonlight outside was bright enough to make shadows, but the garage was completely dark on the inside. As I knelt down, I saw a shadow go by the window and stop. I thought it might be my dad or brother looking to see if we were really asleep, which made my heart race. All of a sudden, my best friend laughed and ran into me. I quickly told her to be quiet by saying, "Shh." "I believe my dad is outside," I said. We got together with the others and pretended to be normal as we went back to our sleeping bags. When I turned around to face the window again, I saw that the shape was still there and not moving. Then I heard my garage door being scratched. This time, my friends also saw, and we all began to quietly freak out. We huddled together and tried to tell ourselves that it was all in our heads. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and we laughed even more. We were scared, but we didn't scream. My mom gave me a phone for my birthday, but it was still in the house with the other gifts, so we couldn't call them. We yelled at whoever it was to leave because we were scared. This made them laugh and bang on the windows even more. The shadow got longer. Someone grown up or a big kid must have done it. We threw a mattress against the window to stop it, but the person tapped and laughed at another window instead. We rushed into the bathroom, but I was able to see through the open door. Someone was trying to open the garage door by shaking it. Last but not least, I screamed as loud as I could. The shaking stopped right away. We looked around and saw the house lights come on. Then my dad ran over to us. It was the same time that a car sped off down the road. Before my dad opened the garage door and saw 5 crying girls inside, we didn't get a good look at it. He brought us all back to the house, where my mom made us feel better. Each of us slept on their king-size bed in their room that night. After that, sleepovers could only happen at home. I couldn't sleep in that garage again for 2 years. Since it was the weekend, my daughter wanted to hike. I chose to take her to an old forest trail that I liked going on when I was younger. There is a lovely, long, straight trail in the forest that goes along a canal and finishes on a peninsula with a view of Palm Beach Bay. But there is only one way in and out. If you get to the end of the trail, which is a 45 minutes walk from the entry, the only way out is to jump into the water. A lot of cars drive by the entrance to the forest, which is on a busy road. Some years ago there were Australian pine trees that blocked the road, but the city cut them down, leaving the trail open. Through the road, people can now see into the forest. That's likely how he knew we were two women walking alone. After walking for a while, we came to the end of the path and sat down to look at the water. I saw a big man in a light blue shirt coming toward us when I got up. I stopped and watched him while my 9-year-old daughter asked if we were going to keep walking. I told her, "No, I just want to see what he does." I thought he would just walk by if he wasn't dangerous. I noticed that he was acting like he was taking pictures when I looked at him. It was weird because he kept pointing his phone at dry grass and rocks. "Oh, he's just taking pictures," my daughter said, but she quickly saw that he wasn't holding a camera. This was the first big red flag for me. I looked at him for about 5 minutes. I stood my ground because I wasn't going to turn my back on him, and I didn't want him behind us. He pretended to walk away at some point, but I could still see him hidden behind some trees. When I waved at him to let him know I saw him, he quickly left and went back toward the door. I waited a few more minutes, and then began walking back with my daughter. She asked if we were still going to hike, but I told her we had to go. I went back on a longer path to avoid the main road, just in case he was waiting. I knew those woods well. When I got to the end, I saw his white truck parked at the front door. He wasn't there when we got to the top of the hill. After that, my partner got pepper spray for me. Over the years, I've been to that trail by myself many times and never had a problem. But this time was different. I'm glad I scared him away. When I go camping from now on, I'll always have pepper spray with me. I got up early on a Sunday morning. A short drive from where I live in the suburbs is my parents' farm, where my dog Molly lives. I love going there. Molly is a mixed breed dog whose soft brown fur and tail are always wagging. She's always happy to see me. My dad and I drove to the farm in the car. When I got off, I ran to give Molly a big hug. That was it for me and her. I asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. I liked taking Molly to the park more than going down the road and back, which is what my dad always thought I would do. With its tall trees, singing birds, and clean air, the forest always felt quiet and friendly. I would often let her off the leash once we got there so she could explore. Molly would run around and sniff everything, her tail moving happily. Thought it would be fun to play baseball with some rocks and an old table leg one day while we were outside. I heard Molly barking all of a sudden. She didn't usually bark at things in the forest, so this was strange. I quickly grabbed the wooden leg to feel safer because I thought it might be a fox or another animal, even though I knew I wouldn't use it on an animal. If I called for her, she would bark at something or someone. She always came when I called, so it was weird. I went after her because she was barking, and soon found her facing a guy who was squatting and digging in the ground. He was probably in his late 50s. I had never seen anyone else in these woods before. He paid no attention to Molly at all, and was focused on what he was cutting in the ground. "Sir, are you all right?" I asked, not fully understanding how serious things were. He slowly turned around, looked at me and said, "Boy, come here. Look what I dug up." I was scared and thought he might chase me if I didn't approach, so I slowly drew closer while staying away. I only saw an empty hole when I looked. He went back to digging, which gave me a chance to grab Molly and slowly walk away. I couldn't help but look back as I walked, though. He had his head buried very deeply when I saw him. I kept watching even though I knew I shouldn't because I was interested. It sent a chill down my spine when I saw that he was holding a bone in his mouth when he finally stood up. It was either from an animal or something else, but I had seen enough. I ran after Molly and grabbed her. It was the spade that I saw flying out of the corner of my eye as I did this. I could hear him laughing. I ran even faster because of his yells. I was sure I wouldn't get lost because I knew the forest well. I ran through thorns and twigs until I got to the garage, where my dad was checking the tractor's lights. I didn't tell him about the man because I was afraid he would tell me I couldn't walk Molly in the bush again. I haven't been to the park by myself since then. It happened a few hours ago, and I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight. Taking a break from work, I'm living in a remote part of the UK right now. This gives me more time for my hobbies, like photography. In a nearby forest, I found a nice-looking group of trees. As the sun was setting, I set up my camera and tripod to get a picture of that perfect evening mood. While I was having fun taking pictures, I saw a woman walking by the door to the arched trees. When I got there, she had parked her car next to mine. I thought she wanted to come up this path because she walked by a few times and stared at me for a long time each time. She did walk somewhere else, though, when she saw that I was taking pictures. After about 5 minutes, she came back, but this time she walked toward me with a funny limp. She stopped and looked at me for a moment, then turned around and walked back toward me. I asked her if everything was okay. It felt very strange, so I was already starting to pack up my camera and get my tripod ready for self-defense. I heard her grunt, and she stopped and looked at me again. That's when I saw that this woman was really a man dressed as a woman. After a moment of unease, he began grunting again. He then went to the edge of the path, picked up a bunch of leaves, and started throwing them all over the place. My friend and I talked on the phone about what was going on. I asked her to stay on the line with me in case the person called back. I chose to take a few more pictures and then leave. I was in the jungle for 10 minutes when I heard the sound of leaves crunching around me. I told myself it was just animals. Then there was no sound at all. Since I hadn't seen or heard from him in about 15 minutes, I thought I was safe and stopped taking pictures. Then, out of the blue, I saw a man walking toward me from the door. He was the same person, but he was dressed like a man now. A grin on his face as he walked past me sent chills down my spine. I had my tripod slung over my shoulder in case something went wrong while I was still on the phone. I quickly ran to my car and got in. As I did this, I saw him come out of the lane I had just been in. He stopped, looked around, and then walked on purpose toward my car. I turned the car on and sped off as fast as I could. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything when I felt safe. They didn't take it too seriously, though, because they thought it might have been a joke. But I have a strong feeling that he was up to much worse. My small group of friends in 6th grade was made up of just 4 girls. We often had sleepovers. We would stay at each other's homes for short periods of time. Since all of our parents knew each other, we were always welcome. 4 of us slept over at the house of my friend Caitlin, who had 2 cousins over for the weekend. Caitlin had 3 older siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. They were always nice and friendly to us, and they stayed away from our sleepovers most of the time. Her sister would tell us stories about high school, which we thought was really cool, and her brother let us play his PlayStation. But that weekend, Caitlin's cousins were coming to stay. One was a girl who was nice but quiet. I didn't like her other cousin, who was a junior in high school. He was very skinny and had greasy white hair that reached his shoulders. When he smiled, it looked like he wasn't smiling at us, but at something in his head. Later that night, Caitlin told us that she didn't really know her cousins. For her, this was the first time meeting her aunt and mother after they got back in touch. Her boy cousin had tried to hang out with her more than her brother. He would often go into her room to look at her books and toys. He also liked to touch her in strange ways. When she pulled away, he'd give her a cold stare before smiling again. We all thought it was strange, but we quickly went back to talking about middle school stuff. Our turn it was to brush our teeth that night in the bathroom Caitlin shared with her sister. After everyone else, it was my turn. When I opened the door, I saw her cousin sitting on the closed toilet seat in the dark. I quickly said sorry, shut the door, and got ready to leave. But he opened it, smiled, and told me to go ahead. It was really tempting to not brush my teeth, but I didn't because I didn't want to make him mad, so I went into the bathroom. He wouldn't let me leave until he walked me back to my room. Before I could say no, He grabbed my strangely warm and sweaty hand and led me to Caitlin's room. My heart was beating fast, and all I could hear was it as I hoped he would leave. We finally got to Caitlin's door. He let go of my hand, said goodnight in a whisper, and went back to his own room. Friends saw that I looked pale and asked what was wrong. I told them what had happened. It wasn't over when Caitlin said she would tell her mom in the morning. We couldn't lock Caitlin's door that night because it was a party, and doors weren't supposed to be locked. Around 3 a.m., Caitlin woke me up. She told us in a whisper that her cousin had already opened the door twice and stood there looking in at us while we slept. When he didn't come back, I climbed into Caitlin's bed with her and tried to stay calm. That wasn't hard. The door opened with a squeak, and his head could be seen in the opening. He stayed there and watched us in the dark. We were afraid to move. In a low voice, he laughed and said something we couldn't understand. Then he shut the door. I left as early as I could the next morning. After the fact, Caitlin told me that her mom told her aunt what happened, and her cousin never came back to visit. Afterwards, my mom also checked to see if Caitlin's cousins were nearby before letting me return to her home.